This is the portable vibrator sanders. Okay, there are two different types. One is the 1/4 inch sander that is just palm held, or sometimes called a palm sander. Okay, the other is the half sheet sander, and it's a little bit larger for a little bit larger work. They basically just vibrate around in a circular motion to finish sand your work on your wood. Talk a minute about the sandpaper that goes onto these machines, this being a full sheet of sandpaper, and the way that these machines are determined by their size is you take and fold this in half and cut it to get the half sheet sandpaper for the one machine, and then fold it over again and cut it to get 4 pieces, and that's why you have a 1/4 sheet machine on the other one. Okay, this sandpaper also comes in different grits. The different grits means that it's the different sizes of sand pellets that's been adhered to the surface of the paper. This particular one is, as you can see, it has an 80 marked on it, which means it's 80 grit, and this is a coarser sandpaper than this 100 grit sandpaper, and much coarser than this 220 grit. 220 grit is a finish, would be called a finishing sandpaper. This is basically the types of sandpaper that we use for most of the woodworking, this garnet sandpaper. Another type of sandpaper that we do use is a wet-dry sandpaper, and this is especially good for using in plastics. You can use it, however, for wood because it is a wet or dry. The only thing is you would never use this wet when you're using either of the two machines. But like if you're making something of plastic, you could use this dry on the machine, and then after you get it basically sanded, then take it over to the sink and use the same sandpaper at the sink to finish sand your piece of plastic. Now let's go in and show how to put the paper onto this 1/4 sheet sander. There is a lever here that has to be pulled, physically pulled with the fingers. Then you take your sandpaper and place that under the clamp, okay, and then push that lever over to the side and out of the way. When you do that, then you turn your sandpaper over, and quite often you have to make a little fold on your sandpaper because it would be too long otherwise. Again, then pull up the lever, force the sandpaper under the clamp as possibly can onto the and out of the way to complete putting the sandpaper onto your machine. The other machine is done in a little bit different method, and that is you set the sandpaper or the machine on its end. In this case, hook the cable over the end of the bench so that you don't put any undue pressure on the cable. Push down on the clamp here, put the sandpaper in, turn it over and sand it on its nose, and again, probably have to fold the end of the paper a little bit. Bring it up, push down the lever, and then force the paper under, and again, get it as tight as you possibly can to keep your paper from rattling on the machine and wearing out faster. You do all of this on your machine before you plug your machine into the power source. Okay? Some machines, or all the machines, come with a lock-on device. That's a little pin that you pull the trigger up, push the pin in, let the trigger go, and it locks the machine to the on position. In our shops, these have basically been removed for safety reasons. After the sandpaper is on, your machine is ready to go, then is the time that you want to plug in your machine into the power source. To prepare your work for sanding, depending upon the size and the shape, in this case I'm going to clamp my work using a bench stop that goes into a hole that's on the bench, and then here's the stop on the vise. Okay, then I'll pull out the vise, put the bench stop up about midway, and then turn my clamp or my vise handle to clamp the wood or the material into place. You should always have your material clamped. Okay, after you've got your material clamped, then you're ready to start your machine. You should always start your machine in the air to give it time to get up to speed before you start making it work. Once you start the machine, you can put on the work. Once you start the machine, you start making start sanding on your piece of material. You should always keep your machine flat onto your work at all times, and do not try to work it over onto the edges. Okay? You should always be sitting flat on the machine, and you should also always move your machine back and forth in an even motion over your work. With the smaller palm sander, you can, in that situation, take and reclamp your work so that you can hold your palm sander then up on the edge of the work to sand in that manner. This way you're not getting so much weight on it, and your paper being smaller, it will work better on an edge than the half sheet sander. We're all finished with your sanding with the machine. At that time, remember that you have purchased the sandpaper, and if you have done a good job of keeping your machine flat, keeping your paper tight, your paper is probably still okay to use for some hand sanding. So therefore, at that time, you can take your paper off, take your paper off your machine, keep the paper, wrap up the cord on the machine, and then go put it in its holder that's been specifically designed to hold this machine when it's not in use.